World Gone Mad, Season 2, Episode 10, Black Hearted. It's a new day. Kezia is training about a mile outside of the base. She notices two deadheads approaching, and she raises her shotgun and fires. She misses. She tries again, and misses. She keeps trying, but she just can't get them. She then reloads. Blake walks up to her, showing that he made it back, and says, "God damn, that wasn't even close." Kezia rolls her eyes and looks back and says, "I'd like to see you try." Blake says, "Step aside, woman." He pulls out his pistol and easily nails both shots and says, "You were saying?" Kezia gives him a small punch to the arm and says, "Maybe I'll just stick to arrows." Blake says, "Yeah, you keep doing that." Kezia says, "I'm glad you're back." Blake says, "Yeah, about that. I brought some company." Kezia says, "Oh yeah?" Blake says, "Yeah, someone that may be able to help us out." Kezia asks, "Who is he?" Blake says, "His name's Tom. It's who I'm taking you to see." They then walk back to the base. Back at the base. We see everyone getting up for the day. The lights come on and we see the base seems to be in better condition than it was before. Kezia and Blake are walking and she says, "So you found new people?" Blake says, "Yeah, they kind of helped me out of where I was at." Kezia asks, "What do you mean?" Blake says, "Well, when Dave sent me and Joel on that scouting mission, the Vipers attacked me. Brought me back to where they were from." Kezia says, "Wait, you were inside their compound?" Blake says, "Yeah, I saw his face. Chris. These people got me out of there. They were prisoners of the Vipers as well, so we helped each other out. We tried to escape with enough effort, and we did. This guy named Lincoln helped me and Joel, but when we tried to get out, Joel was killed. And Lincoln, and this guy Tom." Kezia says, "That's the one who's here?" Blake says, "Yeah. We got out, and we had to leave Joel. They killed him when we were running out, and we just had to keep going." Kezia says, "Oh my God." Blake says, "I'm sorry. He was a great kid." Blake then hugs her and says, "I'm sorry." Kezia says, "I'm sorry too." Blake says, "For what? You didn't do anything wrong." Kezia says, Yeah, I did. Even worse. You're probably not going to believe me when I say this, but..." Blake interrupts her and says, "I always believe you. You're like my sister, you know that." Kezia takes a deep breath and says, "We've all been following a psychopath." Blake looks suspicious and Kezia says, "I'll explain. For now, let's go meet this Tom guy and see what he has to say." Back with Lincoln and Dave. Lincoln drops the Viper's head on the ground and says, "You should know my people are more than capable of defending themselves." Dave says, "You don't have to explain who has the bigger balls here." "That's obviously me. I'm open for a calm discussion." Lincoln looks back at Sydney and says, "You tied her to a chair, beat her face in, and threatened to kill her. You must think I'm insane." He then pulls his gun and clicks it and says, "Well, for your information, I'm a goddamn outlaw." Dave laughs and says, "I'm handing over my weapon as a sign of good faith. And your people?" Lincoln interrupts and says, "Family. They're my family. And if you think I'm letting you walk amongst them, you have come to the wrong man." Dave slowly puts his gun down, and Lincoln approaches Dave with the gun still pointed towards him and says, "If this is a trick, then I will be bullets short after what I do to you." Back at the factory, we see Chris walk out, and all of his people are standing in a big group, and they all look like they're ready for battle. We see Matthew standing there with about 20 to 30 guards in riot gear, and Chris says to Matthew, "The army base. Hit them hard and take out who you can. Supplies, food, guns, and we bring it back here. We'll use it against Lincoln when he shows up." Chris then goes on the railing and says to his Vipers, "Today is about destruction, eliminating what threatens us all. This is about defending this place with our lives. I may have almost died yesterday, but the Vipers, they don't die like that. Our queen does not die like that." The crowd looks confident, and Chris says, "So let's make Viper history." We see Chris in his office talking with Alexander and a few other Vipers. Chris says, "This is it. It's like I said before, when we were first gathered here together. They are out for blood when they show up at our doorstep. And that's not if, it's when. And they will. We need to be ready." Alexander asks, "What about the girl?" Meaning Haley. Chris says, "Well, she now knows. I told her." The Viper says, "So what do we do with her?" "I have her here, but I don't think she truly understands yet." Alexander says, "I'll handle it." Haley is fast asleep in the cell. She's startled by the cell door opening, and we have Alexander who walks in. Haley looks terrified, and he says, "Remember me?" Haley says, "No." Alexander says, "It's okay. This is a safe place for us to get to know each other." Haley looks scared, and Alexander starts unbuckling his pants and says, "The more you resist, the worse it'll be for you." He grabs Haley and throws her over the table, and we zoom out on the cell door as we hear Haley screaming. Back with Lincoln. Lincoln still has his gun pointed towards Dave, and he says, "So where are they, Dave?" Dave says, "What?" Lincoln says, "Your people. Come the fuck on, man. I've known you way long enough to know that you're not here just on your own. That's the only reason I am not pulling the trigger right now. And if I do this, my family will die." And then Lincoln looks back at Sydney and Luke and says, "Take a little jaunt around the area for me. Let's see what kind of surprises he has up his sleeve." Sydney goes with Luke and looks at Lincoln and says, "On it," as she gives Dave a death stare. Lincoln is facing Dave alone now, when then he sees blood all over Dave's hands, and Lincoln says, "You finally decided to pick a fight with someone that wasn't me?" Dave says, "It's what I came here to talk to you about." Lincoln slowly lowers his gun and says, "We'll take a seat, but I'll have you know, I've had a rather shit couple of days, so if you're lying, which wouldn't surprise anybody here today, just do it now, so I can get this over with." Dave nods and is gonna listen, so we see Lincoln sit down at the picnic table with his gun in his holster and says, "Have a seat. You want to talk? Let's talk." We see the sun slowly coming up, and Sydney and Luke are walking on the nearby roads. They are looking everywhere expecting to find someone. They go into a tunnel, but there's nothing there except for old graffiti, and they quickly find out that there isn't anyone nearby. Sydney says, "Let's turn back. Nobody's been here." Luke asks, "How can you be so sure?" Sydney says, "Back in the DEA, we used to have to do this kind of stuff every week, and that was if we were lucky." Luke taps on her shoulder and says, "Well, look at you. We'd be lost without you. Come on, let's go." Sydney and Luke are making their way back to Lincoln, and Luke says to Sydney, "The sun's coming up. We need to head back." Sydney looks mad and says, "That son of a bitch is up to something, and I'm gonna find out what." She keeps walking, and Luke says, "You can't bring her back." Sydney stops, and tears start running down her eyes, and Luke slowly walks up to her and says, "I'm so sorry for this. I've never had a chance to say it, but I really am. She was a nice girl. Back when I took her in, I used to bring in a lot of people into the Suburban, but that's how we expanded so much. Your sister was the only one cracking up jokes every 2 seconds during the orientation, I swear." Sydney wipes her tears and kind of chuckles, and Luke says, "Come on, let's go tell Lincoln there's nothing out here." Back with Lincoln and Dave. Lincoln asks, "So why are you here?" Dave says, "You don't need your gun. I'm here in the hopes that you're willing to listen. This is a talk between two leaders, because I know for damn sure that it can't be bygones be bygones." Dave laughs and says, "You really changed, Mr. West. Now I'm not here to reminisce." Lincoln asks, "What are you here to talk about?" Dave says, "Same thing as when I first came to talk to you at that prison cell. Chris Williams." Dave says, "I couldn't see it then, but now I think I'm starting to get it." Lincoln says, "I take no responsibility on what happened to your family. The only person that's to blame for any of this, the only person that got your family killed, was you." Dave looks angry, and Lincoln says, "You made friends with the enemy, and all you were doing is looking for someone to blame. So you threw this on me when I had nothing to do with it. So if you think there's an apology here coming for you, then I will tell you that this conversation's just about over. Or I can tell you some shit that you actually want to hear. Your choice. Dave says, my people are in danger. You look like you've been through some shit. Lincoln says, the Vipers? Those are Chris's people. Dave says, look, I came here to talk about a battle plan. Me and my people got ambushed on the road last night. A bunch of my fighters are dead, and I couldn't save them. Dave lies to Lincoln. We see him leaving his last dying soldier that he was begging for his life. We hear the man yelling from far, currently, I tried to save them, but the Vipers got him first, and I had to get away. Lincoln says, bull fucking shit. Alright, now for the truth. Dave laughs and says, you're fucking good, I'll tell you. Alright. We got attacked. We got in a car wreck, and one of my men were still left breathing. But I left him behind, so I could get away. Lincoln says, there it is. Dave says, the blood on my hands came later. I managed to get away, but they found me. I killed a lot of them, and came face to face with that son of a bitch. Lincoln asks, he's dead? Dave says, wish he was. I took his hand. He was on the ground, and I was so close to... Lincoln says, you did nothing. Dave says, I almost killed Chris, and I did take his hand off. Lincoln says, let me tell you something. After you vanished, we built a place. Somewhere me and my family could feel safe until one night our community was destroyed. And my people got their heads hung up on trees, including my own 2 children. And my wife is probably dead. And I'm just waiting for the day of confirmation that she isn't here. So when you think that I don't know what it's like to lose a family because of him, think twice. I know exactly what it's like. Exactly! And Chris, you didn't do a damn thing. Not at all. Dave asks, oh yeah? And why is that? Because I'm pretty sure I almost got him. Lincoln says, tell me how this sounds. About 2 nights ago, I attacked some of the Vipers, and there was still one left alive. Anyway, this prick, I go up to him and he asks. I ask him about Chris. Next thing you know, he says that Chris is running a small settlement of a much bigger settlement somewhere else that is ran by someone called the Queen. Dave looks surprised and asks, did he say where they were? Lincoln says, no. We tried talking to one of them that we held captive. Dave asks, did you get anything out of him? Lincoln says, only that taking off limbs is not enough for these people. They all would apparently die for the Queen. Dave looks shocked and Lincoln says, so let's do it. Let's kill each other. It ain't gonna change anything. It ain't gonna change what's already coming for us. And let's face it, we need the goddamn bullets. What you did to Billy, you're not for me to kill. If you die, it'll be on Tom's terms, not mine. I wouldn't get a damn thing out of it. And frankly, I ain't interested. I've got an actual threat to deal with now. Not some lowlife that blames someone else for screwing up. No. People that would cut my head off and use it as a fucking basketball. Dave looks shocked and Lincoln says, oh yes, they're as crazy as it gets. Dave says, well, what exactly are you asking? Lincoln says, I am willing to lower my gun and put our forces together to take these people down. Because with that, and what I heard the other day, these people are way bigger of a force than both of our groups combined. And if we kill each other, and we'll have less people, and the last group standing will definitely get butchered by these people next. Then we hear Sydney contact Lincoln over the walkie and she says, "Lincoln, we're on our way back." Lincoln looks at Dave in the eyes and says, "Sydney, did you find anything out there?" Sydney says, "No. It doesn't look like anybody's been out here in a while." Lincoln puts his gun in his holster and says, "Stay there. We're on our way." Dave says, "I'm taking my gun." Lincoln says, "And what did I just say about not trying to kill me?" Dave laughs and says, "Don't worry, cowboy. I ain't gonna waste the bullets." Lincoln says, "Get in." And Lincoln gets in the driver's seat. Dave gets in the passenger seat, and they both look untrusting of each other, but they drive off after coming to terms with their decision. Back at the base, we see Kezia and Blake and a bunch of men, and they all walk into a meeting room. Blake introduces Tom. "Kezia, this is Tom. He comes from that group I was telling you about. He's been fighting the Vipers for a while, and when we heard about the trouble we've had, he insisted for him and a bunch of his people to help us out." Kezia shakes his hand and says, "Hi, I'm Kezia. I'm the former leader of this place. Until our boss returns." Tom says, "It's my pleasure, ma'am. I must say you have a nice place here. Great food, nice people, and my God, I haven't had a nice cold beer in a long time." "Thanks for that." Kezia says, "It's my pleasure. When do you expect your leader to be back?" Kezia says, "He's supposed to be making it back by the base tonight, actually." Tom says, that's too bad. Well, I'll be glad to meet him once he arrives." Blake says, "All right, look, we gotta talk about Dave." Kezia says, Yeah, we do." Blake asks, "Do you want to give Tom a tour first?" Kezia asks Blake, "You trust him?" Blake says, Yeah, I do." Kezia takes a deep breath and says, "Okay, I'm about to say something that's gonna sound insane. You're probably not gonna believe me." Blake stops her and says, "I always believe you. What's going on?" Kezia says, "Ever since Dave showed up, I'm afraid he's not been honest with us." Blake asks, "What do you mean?" Kezia says, "That night, when Dave said he got ambushed by the Vipers, that was a lie." Blake sounds shocked, and Kezia says, "When Dave and William got split off, Dave killed him. Dave wanted to make it look like he was a hero and that William died for us, but he killed him so he could take control of us, make us feel sorry for him, and let him control us." Blake says, "Oh my God, that stupid fucking prick. Should have fucking known." Kezia says, "Hey, there's nothing you could have done, okay?" Blake asks, "So wait, who told you all of this?" Kezia says, "He was holding 2 sisters here hostage. They told me everything about who he was, about how he has beef with this other group from before, and apparently he did all of this just so he could raise an army." Tom stops her and asks, wait. 2 sisters. What are their names?" Kezia says, "Sydney and Emma." Dave beat the shit out of one of them, but I couldn't stand the thought of it. So I broke the rules and I let them go. When Dave left on his hunt, they were gone not too long after. Tom asks, do you know where they are now? Kezia says, I'm sorry. I really have no idea. If I knew you were coming, I would have kept them here. Tom smiles and says, No, you doing that for them. That means a lot to me. They're like my only family I've got left in this world. So thank you. Tom looks at Kezia and Blake and says, So, how about we take this son of a bitch down? Kezia says, Well, you got my vote, but I don't know what to do. All these people out there still believe in his lies. How are we supposed to go about this? Blake looks pissed and says, We exposed that son of a bitch. Out of nowhere, we hear a big explosion from outside. We see a bunch of big trucks pulling up, and one of the Vipers comes out with an RPG, and the Viper takes off his helmet, and we see it's Matthew. The guard says, Stop right there! Don't you come any closer! Matthew says, Oh, don't worry. I won't. And he blows up the gates with the RPG. Matthew says, Spread out! We see the Vipers running through the army base, and they're killing every person they see on sight. Tom, Kezia, and Blake see this from inside. Kezia says, What the hell was that? Tom looks out the window and says, The Vipers. They're all over out there. Kezia grabs her bow and she says, Come on, we gotta go. Tom grabs his axe and Kezia says to both Tom and Blake, You both stay with me. We kill every single one of these pricks and we don't stop until they're all dead, okay? Tom says, I've been here for 2 minutes, but you got it, boss lady. And then Kezia, Tom, and Blake go out there and fight. We see the Vipers in armor just killing a bunch of people in the streets. As we see Tom, Kezia, and Blake run out of there and try to get the poor families to safety. Kezia says to some of the families, Go down to the bunker. We have it for emergencies just like this one. We're gonna take this place back. We will. Okay, go. We see a big group of Vipers marching in the streets. We see a crying mother seeing her daughter suffering, and the Vipers walk up to her. And the mother asks, Please, don't make her suffer. One of the Vipers pulls out his gun and shoots the mother in the heart, and she falls to the ground. And the Viper says, There, now she doesn't have to suffer alone. Tom, Kezia, and Blake are running through the base trying to find these Vipers, and Kezia quickly says, Get back! They all back up against the wall and the Vipers march by. They almost got caught, but the Vipers didn't see them. Out of nowhere, 4 Vipers come up behind them and tackle Blake to the ground. Tom quickly takes his axe and slices one of their heads off. Kezia quickly shoots 2 of them with 2 arrows at the same time. The last one takes a swipe at Tom, but Blake quickly gets right up and slits the guy's neck open. Kezia says, still slightly shook up, Everyone okay? Blake says, Sons of bitches are hard to kill with armor on. Tom stops and says, Huh. Kezia asks, What? Tom has a small smirk. We see Tom loading a gun. We see Tom, Kezia, and Blake, and they took the Viper's armor to blend in. Tom says, "All right, listen. We go through the streets, we take out what remains, we use the rifles, then we end this, tonight." Kezia puts her helmet on and says, "You are one slick son of a bitch." Tom says, "Yes, ma'am, I am. That double arrow shit you did back there, more of that will be appreciated. Now let's go get your home back." We see all three of them walk out in slow motion, and they start gunning down a bunch of the Vipers. They are running the opposite direction, and then they reload and go down the next street. The three of them are running. Tom says, "Gunfire's coming from downhill. That's where the rest of them are." The three of them start shooting at the Vipers from far, but they run out of ammunition. Then we can see Matthew spots them from a distance, and he says to a Viper, "These sons of bitches are walking among us." The Viper says, "No, they have armor." And Matthew looks at him and says, "Exactly. Kill them." We see Tom, Kezia, and Blake circle back around, and they shoot three more of them, but then you hear a gun click. Tom, Blake, and Kezia turn around, and they see Matthew with an AK-47 pointed towards them. And he says, "Take off your goddamn masks. Now!" They take off their masks, and Matthew says, "In the name of the Queen, I sentence you to die." Out of nowhere, Lincoln, Sydney, Luke, and Dave come in and kill a big amount of the Vipers. Matthew and a couple more Vipers run. Dave charges in and mows down a bunch of them. Lincoln looks at Kezia and sees Tom again and quickly says, "Let's get them before they escape." We see Lincoln and the group run after them, but Matthew and the other Vipers get away. Lincoln and Sydney shoot at them, but the Vipers drive away just barely with their lives. Lincoln looks pissed, and Sydney says, "They're not getting back to that factory." Sydney says, "I'll stop them." Lincoln says, "I'll come with you." Sydney says, "No, you gotta stay here and be ready for whatever comes next. This place is gonna need you." And we see Sydney get in the RV and chase after Matthew and the truck. Lincoln looks worried for Sydney, but he then walks back into the base. We see everyone from the base walk up to Lincoln, and one of the random guys shakes his hand, and we see Kezia, Blake, and Tom walk up to Lincoln. Lincoln can't tell if Tom is mad, but when Tom walks up to him, he hugs Lincoln. But then, as we focus on this happy moment, Tom notices Dave. Tom swings at Dave with the axe, and Dave ducks and falls to the ground. Dave is down on the ground, and Tom starts beating his face in. Dave's people interfere and attack Tom. Lincoln tries to stop them, but before you know it, the whole entire group is fighting. Blake has enough and shoots a few shots in the air. The whole group stops, and Blake slowly walks down. "Everybody shut up! What the fuck is wrong with you people?" Dave gets up with a busted nose, and Tom looks angry, and Blake yells, "You want to kill him, he wants to kill you. So fucking what? These people lost their lives again by these people. There are families, little kids that died because of them. The Vipers started at this factory, and now they are everywhere. Everywhere you go, everywhere you run, they will always find you. I brought everyone here because I knew all of this. There was only one chance of maybe, just maybe, getting out of this. That's why I brought all of us together. When this is done, go ahead, kill each other, by all means. But stop fixating on the past. We've all done things we're not proud of. And we're gonna have to do those same damn things again. And killing each other? When the Vipers will just kill us the next second we have a moment of victory? Lincoln interrupts and says, "Is pointless." Blake looks over. "Me and Lincoln? We're calling the shots through this whole thing. Till this is over, you people will follow our lead." Dave laughs and says, "I already came to make peace." Lincoln said there's multiple places where the Vipers live, and that the factory is not the only one of them. Lincoln says, "It's where we start." Blake nods at Lincoln and says to everyone, "You may not like each other. You may think that y'all don't need each other. But when you're down on the ground and you think your days are almost over, your new brothers in arms will have your back, no matter what. We do this together. And if we die, we will die together. Understood?"
Come now, child, the day is long. Hide not yourself from me.
The crowd seemed to be in agreement, and they all split off for the night. Lincoln tells Blake, "Look, man, I'm sorry for all this." Blake says, Nah, it's okay, you don't have to apologize." "Lincoln, this is Kezia. Kezia, why don't you show Lincoln and these people a safe place for them to stay for the night?" Kezia says, "Of course, come with me." Dave is wiping the blood from his nose, and we see Tom walking away, and Dave looks like he wants to follow Tom, and Blake interferes and gets in the way. "Let the man go." Dave says, "You listen to me, man. Don't forget that." Blake laughs and whispers, "Do you want me to tell these people what really happened to William?" Dave looks shocked, and Blake says, "If you try anything or hurt anyone from either side, I will tell these people the truth about the great Dave Miller." Dave slowly walks away, and Blake goes down the opposite road.
Just as the night swallows the sun, I know you'll come for me.
A few hours later, Chris is inside of a car. We hear the sound of deadheads up ahead, but we only hear it. Chris has a big smile on his face, and he turns on his headlights as we reveal he has a few hundred deadheads following his car. We see it's starting to snow as Chris laughs and says, "Let the slaughter begin."
Rest now, child, the day is done. The dark comes for everything. inside the heart of everyone, there lives infinity.
In the future, we have Miles training with his sword. He stops and takes a break. We see him eating some beans, and then he gets his things and starts walking back to wherever he comes from. Later on, Miles has been walking for a while. We see him pull out his compass to make sure he's going the right way, and then he smells smoke. He stops in his tracks and starts walking in that direction. We see him slowly walk through the woods, and he steps out to see a burnt-out factory. We see all of Chris's factory has been completely destroyed. Miles is in shock and picks up his walkie and says, "This is Miles, come in." No response. "This is Miles. I must speak to a sergeant right away." Over. Still no response. Son of a bitch. Miles puts the walkie away and walks in. We see him slowly walk in, and he sees dead vipers everywhere. Miles looks pissed. But as he keeps walking through, we see one man on his knees. He looks to be frozen stiff, and he's got his hands tied and is covered in blood. Miles walks up to this guy, and we see his mouth is still slightly moving. But there's nothing but blood coming out. Every time his mouth opens, blood keeps pouring out. Miles pulls out his pistol and is about to put him down, but the man looks like he's trying to say something. And Miles sees that. The man is whispering, Lincoln, West. Miles looks shocked to hear Lincoln, and he then shoots him and puts him out of his misery. Lincoln West, huh? He puts his gun in his holster and says, "Well, we'll just have to make sure he doesn't go anywhere."